An Insomniac's advice on how not to sleep. Written by Insomnia Storyteller. Ever since I moved out of my childhood home, I have been suffering from horrible insomnia, mainly triggered by extreme anxiety. Each night, as I can feel myself falling asleep, I wake up in a fit of panic, my heart beating out of my chest. I had tried everything, increasing my exercise during the day, reading until I fall asleep with a book on my face, melatonin, and even prescription sleep aids. Nothing seems to help me, at least not for more than a while. That is, until I developed a new strategy: listening. I had noticed that during my days, I would fall asleep during lectures. I felt myself drifting off, my eyes drooping heavily. I would only wake up when my friend would tap my shoulder, making sure I wouldn't get publicly humiliated by my professor. I realized that this drifting off was triggered by the distraction of listening to a boring lecture. Perhaps if this worked, I could use it to actually fall asleep at night. I tried it that very evening. Around 11 p.m., I found myself getting sleepy, and chose a story to listen to while I tried to fall asleep. All I had in my audiobook files was an old Stephen King novel, and so that was what I went with. I wanted something that would last all night, in case I woke up. My anxiety would activate if I knew the story was over, and I would then calculate how long I had slept and fall into a spiral again. The book was plenty long, about 15 hours, so I had nothing to worry about. For the next few weeks, maybe months, I listened to the same book to fall asleep. I found myself getting familiar with the opening, even memorizing the first minute or two after a little while. The book became familiar, comforting. It was an escape for me, and I found myself whispering the lines I knew as I drifted off. Sometimes I wouldn't fall asleep as quickly, but I found instead a fear of not being asleep. I was excited to hear more of the story I always passed out during. I had finally found something that worked for me, and I was beyond thrilled by the idea that maybe I would be able to continue on with my life. That sense of normalcy vanished, though, one horrific night. I laid on my side, facing the wall while the narrator described the accident the main character was involved in. I knew these lines all too well, and was softly whispering them to myself while I could feel my eyes grow heavy and my consciousness start to fade.
"The pickup will lose always,"
played the story, but I snapped back to reality in this moment. It was wrong. The line was just off. Sure, it meant the same thing, but I knew it was supposed to say, "The pickup will lose every time." Panicked, I turned over to grab my phone and rewind the story to hear it again. Maybe I had just been asleep and dreamed that the line was wrong. It had to be. There was no other explanation. As I unlocked my phone, I was blinded by the glow of the screen. I went into the app to rewind the story, but to my horror, nothing was playing. The story was off and paused at the moment down the book it was at when I had woken up that morning. 11 hours in, and I knew the line belonged hours before that. That's when it hit me. I had forgotten to turn on the audiobook. I hadn't been listening to the familiar lull of the narrator. Yet, I had heard those lines I knew by heart. I put down my phone and turned onto my back to sit up when I saw it. The creature was dark, blending in nearly perfectly with the night. I could see its outline only faintly because of the crack of light coming in from under the closet door. It was posed on the edge of my bed, crouching on its legs and arms like a gorilla does when it walks. The monster noticed me looking at it, and a smile crept up onto its face. Its sharp teeth far too many to be human, protruded from its mouth as it grinned at me. I dove under the covers trembling, hoping with everything in me that it was just my imagination and that it would be gone when I came back up. I peeked my eyes over the blanket, only to see it had gone a small bit closer. It didn't speak. It just stared at me. Go away, I said. It only looked back at me, smile growing wider. I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't want to leave the safety of my blanket. Instead, I dove back under the covers, burying myself and willing it to leave. That's when I finally heard it speak. Its voice was so familiar. It was mimicking the narrator's voice that was in my audiobook and telling the story as I had heard it so many times before. If I really listened, I could observe some slight differences in the words, but it gave the same meaning. It hit me. How did this creature know the story so well? I felt all the blood drain from my body as I realized how it knew. It had been watching me every night. It had been keeping me up, but I had found a way to tune it out. The creature had been watching, waiting, and listening to the same story I had until it felt it could blend into my routine again. Realization and dread had struck me as I understood that while I thought I had cured my insomnia, I had actually made it so much worse.